Welcome to Storytellers Behind the Scenes. We're so happy and grateful that you've decided to tune in today. As many of you know who have listened to some of our podcasts, I've been in the industry for a while. I've had a number of jobs, and I always talk about the amazing friendships, lifelong friendships that I've had with people that I worked with at Banyan Productions. Today is no exception. I am so delighted to introduce you to Barb Alfano White. Barb and I have been friends for many years. We met at Banyan. She was the executive producer of A Wedding Story, and we worked very closely. I learned so much from her over the years. We've gone on to collaborate on a number of projects. She's one of my dearest friends, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing her stories. She is an incredible producer, writer, and just an amazing talent. So sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy. And thanks for listening. Welcome, Barb. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you, Jody. I am so happy to be here. You're one of my favorite people in the world, of course.
I feel the same way.
And we have shared such history in so many levels. But of course, it always starts at Banyan, doesn't it? a lot of the people you know and we know. Mm-hmm.
All roads lead back to Banyan. I mean, I've had this conversation and I've spoken with several Banyanites, and we all say the same thing: the culture there, the friendships. We really were a family, and so many of us are still very much connected. You and I have stayed connected over the years for many reasons. I would say in a lot of instances, we've kind of lived parallel lives, we've had some different experiences, but many of them are the same. And thank goodness we have each other to bounce ideas off, talk about our parents and our kids. And we kind of raised our kids at the same age. And so we have shared a lot of those experiences. You had an interesting start in your career. So your first job, you worked at a donut shop. Is that correct?
Yes. So my first job in high school, I was a waitress at a donut shop, which still remains there, believe it or not. It's one of those little, those hole in the wall, like wonderful little family run donut shops. And I got a job there, and I know my parents were like, "No, are you sure you really want to do this?" But my dad was like, "You got to have some job. You got to work. You got to work through high school." So it was interesting. I squeezed the jelly into the jelly donuts. That was my job. I had like a little outfit on, and I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. It was what it was. It was a little bit more like, "Hey, waitress, come over here. I need you." A little during the times that waitresses were really kind of shuffled around a lot. But
I find it interesting. Your dad kind of pushed you, right, early on to be responsible and to, push yourself through working on maybe at a job that you didn't love, as you just said, but you didn't quit that job right away, obviously.
No, I didn't quit that job. As a matter of fact, this was the only job I have ever been fired from. It was actually a very pivotal moment. So in my 16-year-old wisdom, I decided one Saturday to call in sick and go to the high school football game, because that was more important to me. And I was like, well, I'm not going to miss this game. I'm going to go. All my friends are going. I called in sick. I went to the game. And guess who was serving donuts? My boss at the football game. And I'm in line and he sees me and we make this little connection. And I'm like, oh no, oh crap. Got busted. So the next time I was supposed to do my shift, I show up and he's there and he pulls me aside. He said, "You know what, I hate to tell you this, but I'm going to have to fire you. And I'm going to teach you a lesson. You'll never forget this. You'll never forget this. you're 16 and you can't do that. You can't lie. And I was terrified. I was terrified to go home and tell my parents. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, I got fired. But it really has stuck with me. I mean, I am one of those people. If I'm not really sick, I'm not going to call in sick. I mean, I've never done that since that moment. And it really sort of built a bit of character, I would say, that experience.
And that's the reason I talk about that, because, sometimes I start off with say, how did you get in the business? And we'll talk about all those things. But I found it interesting that at that young age, such a pivotal point in your life that would stick with you throughout your whole adult life and your career. So it is a valuable lesson to learn. So did you know at 16 what you wanted to pursue? Did you know when you were going to college, like, hey, I want to be in the TV business? What was going through your mind, and where did you go to school? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the funny thing is, so no, to answer your question, no, I had no idea. I was really just trying to figure it out. And what I did is I started out at college, which is still here at Sacred Heart University. At that time, it was small and kind of a commuter college. And I was commuting from home. And I started thinking I wanted to be in business because my dad was he went to Harvard Business School. He was really, a powerhouse and so formidable in my mind. I was like, oh, well, I want to do that too. So I quickly realized that wasn't a good choice for me. It was, a lot of the math, a lot of the accounting. So, I mean, certainly great. It just, my sister, that's her wheelhouse. It just wasn't mine. So I actually also was just in this point in my life where most of my friends went to Boston to school. It seems like that was just the most popular choice. And I wanted to go to Boston too. So I did, I moved there and I moved to Boston, and I had taken some courses in business. And I started actually working there as a travel agent. So that was my other job I did also in high school. I started to write tickets and work for a friend of mine's. Her mom had a travel agency. And so I had a little bit of experience. And I went to Boston. I worked for a place called Garber Travel. And I was Barbara from GABA because I was I was Barbara from GABA Travel. And I really loved that industry. And I was still taking courses at Boston University at night, trying to figure it out. And I kind of stumbled upon media and just slowly, started to figure out I always liked to write. So that was definitely something I loved. Eventually, I moved back. I moved back to Connecticut, and I finished my degree back at Sacred Heart University, but I finished in media studies and I loved it. I absolutely, found my place.
Did you used to journal a lot, Barb? I know you love to write. So, as a kid, mm-hmm. I took a lot of writing classes, creative writing, whatever it was. But I have looked back upon some of those things that I wrote, and some of them were really heady, mm-hmm. and some of them mm-hmm. were just like, what the heck was I thinking? Like, what was I going through at that time? So did you journal as a kid and think, you know what, I think I can use this skill and build upon those abilities?
Oh, absolutely. My best friend in high school, who is still one of my best friends, she and I really, we went through everything together, and we always wrote everything down. Of course, I have to remember at that time, that's what you did. We wrote on our notebooks. We wrote, as you said, these diaries, and we wrote songs with a pen, and we would take lyrics from all our favorite songs and just, write about them. And we did a school class trip to London together where we really it was an amazing experience. To answer your question, I definitely have always been a writer at heart.
Because when I talk to, even Daryl, who, my husband, and other DPs, they were already as kids making films,
Right.
borrowing their parents' camera or using a still camera and doing stop motion or doing something. But they were already playing around with storytelling. That's why I asked you that question, because, some people it's just innate, that drive or that interest.
I totally agree with you. It's like as soon as I started to do that, as soon as I started to tap into that storytelling and observing and reading, I was also, really a big reader. I think that just set me on a path.
So when you graduated, what was your first job out of college?
So my first job, I actually, in Connecticut, they had these small production companies in South Norwalk, which was really a historical, cool area. Still is. It's still very popular. At that time, you can't go on Indeed and send your resume out. You were really just, going door to door or word of mouth or meeting people. And I really wanted to work for this production company called Praxis Media. Praxis Media was in a very cool building, a production company in South Norwalk, Connecticut. And I just thought that they were such an interesting company because I know they were working on corporate videos and things that I thought I would really be interested in. So I showed up at their door and I said, can I have a job? I'm really good at what I do. And I didn't really say that, to be honest. I wasn't that confident, but I was determined. So I would, in my sort of nice way, I would say, here's my resume. I'm really interested in working for you. Let me know if you have anything. And I did this like almost every week. I would just be there. And finally, the manager, she said, well, you know what? We might be able to come up with something for you. So I joined the team, and they were small, but really, really great group of people. We worked for some IBM videos. It was all corporate stuff. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really, really liked it. I think I was there for quite a while, and they got bigger and bigger. Like I kept hiring people. They had crews. We did a lot of different events. And then I heard about this brand new show that was coming to Stamford, Connecticut, called Satellite News Channel. And I always thought news would be like where I would really fit. And I applied to be an intern there. And basically they, because that was the only way you could get in, is an internship. It was a paid internship. And I left Praxis. I started working at Satellite News Channel. And this place was owned by Group W and Westinghouse, and really a big deal. They were a 24-hour news channel led by some of the biggest names in TV at the time. Frank Capra's son, Tom Capra, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall's son, Stephen Bogart, and Mitchell Cannell, who went on to do many films and studio productions. They were all very successful. And they wanted to put together a 24-hour news channel that would hit the air and be live before Ted Turner did.
I was going to say they were ahead of their time.
That was
they really were.
It was like, we're going to get this going. We're going to move forward, and we're going to do it before Ted Turner can do it for CNN. So that's what it was. It was live. There were mistakes happening, of course, but it was a state-of-the-art studio at the time, and it was really fun. You could do whatever whatever they needed. Yeah, I was an intern for a couple months, and I would just rip scripts or get coffee. It was not glamorous, but I just got to know the vibe of the newsroom, and I just put myself wherever I could be. How can I help? And I was hired along with one other person. It was out of like 65, which really surprised me. And they said, we really like you. You just have to get noisier in the noisy newsroom. And I said, okay, I'll remember that, because I was just kind of quiet. And as I continued there, I could do just about anything, because when the writers were writing furiously and a story came up, they would say, can you write? sit down, write. Can you edit? Sit in the edit room. You could do anything you wanted. And they really did kind of underestimate what it required to do a 24-hour news station. They had satellite dishes. You would just turn them to wherever a news station had a story. The footage would come in, you'd write it, and it would hit the air. So it was amazing. It was amazing.
You were cranking out stories like by the second, how they were in the moment as they were revealing themselves. You were just banging out copy and putting them. That's amazing. So you would say then your experience at Praxis, that determination really set you up for this other job, right? I mean, it gave you the experience. But how fortunate to go to work for that news station that allowed you the opportunity to touch and get your hands in so many things. I mean, I kind of had that in my first news job was at WPEC. It was an ABC affiliate in West Palm Beach. And I was hired, and my hourly wage, okay, this is back in the Stone Ages. The hourly wage was like $3.25 or something. It was something ridiculous.
I remember.
But it was my first job, and I didn't even care. I mean, my parents were helping support me, and thank goodness I was lucky enough to be able to have parents that could do that. And I was so grateful. At first I was commuting, and then I moved up to West Palm Beach. I was living in Florida in Fort Lauderdale, but it was interesting because I was hired to basically run the news tapes and do some editing, like machine to machine editing, not what we have today. And if anybody's seen Broadcast News, that film is like, I love that movie, but that one scene where they're feverishly working and they go running through the newsroom, and they're like diving under, filing boxes. I mean, that's really what it was like, just to get that story on the air on time. But they sent me out as a reporter. I remember interviewing the Beach Boys, covering a murder story. I mean, I was a kid, but it afforded me the opportunity. So sometimes going to work for some of those smaller news agencies or in those smaller markets is really a great way to get your early opportunity to try everything and figure out what you liked. So you didn't love news? Is that why you got out of it?
Well, yeah. I mean, they were
some talk shows after that, right?
I did. So there were a couple of moments where the U.S. Embassy was bombed in Lebanon. Like, we were worldwide, so we had everything coming in, all the footage. And I remember just looking through that very sad footage of people. Of the devastation that happened there. And I was like, ugh, this was so powerful. And I was not really cut out for that hard, edgy news. But I did try a couple on-camera things. I was like, is this what I want to do? No, that did not work out either. And then I really liked the assignment desk. So the assignment desk is where, you would select the stories, you'd go to the AP wires, you'd collect it all, you'd find the best stories. And that's where I kind of, that's again was a pivotal moment for me, because I really loved the stories and I loved telling stories. But when they were the really horrible events, it really didn't fit for me. So
I was the same way, Barb.
Yeah. You are.
I worked there when the Challenger exploded, and I was just mortified at how ABC covered like the funeral. The cameras were like in the kids' faces, and there was just so much stuff that turned my stomach. And yet I worked in news in Philly, and I just kind of couldn't get away from it at some point because of the interest in current events.
Right.
But then I had to cut loose because it would keep me up at night.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. It does. It keeps you up at night. You're just anxious about the world. I mean, we're living through that now, but in some degree, but it was still great experience. And then I heard about the Sally Jessy Raphael show moving to New Haven, Connecticut. And they were looking for associate producers and people to work for them. And I applied there to Channel 8, where they were going to have the studio. And of course, I came from, as I said, my first, corporate video, and satellite news channel was news. So I had my little, outfit on, my suit, and I interview with the EP, and he is in a sweatshirt and jeans, and he's like, come on in. He goes, why are you all dressed up? And I was like, well, I'm here for an interview. He goes, okay, you got the job. I said, that's it? He said, yeah, we're looking for people. You live in Connecticut. You seem nice. You want to do this? I said, yeah, I do. I really want to do this. I think it sounds great. He told me a little bit about their staff, which was small. They were originally in St. Louis and came to Connecticut to eventually, hopefully, wind up in New York, which they did. But at that point, they were still growing. I think Oprah was on the air.
So was Sally a regional show at the time, or was it a national show?
National show.
And they did it there.
And this is where they moved from St. Louis to Connecticut. Lucky for me. And Phil Donahue was on the air as well. Right. And Oprah, I believe, and that was it. I mean, it was just the beginning of the talk show era. So Sally very quickly gained an audience, like really quickly. And what they needed me to do is, at that time, and you'll understand this, Jody, it's just like, the affiliates around the country, they either had 1 hour blocks to fill the show, daytime programming, or 30 minute. They were going to 30 minute. So they needed somebody to walk in and cut the show to a 30-minute version, so that they could offer the 30-minute to different affiliates. So that was my job. He's like, it's kind of a weird job. I don't know how to even explain it, but you'll sit in the control room. You'll take notes on the show because they taped it as if it was live. It wasn't, but pretty much to time with a studio audience. And then
wow, what a great education that was. I mean, how much have you used those skills over your course of your career?
I've actually come full circle to that. So I was, in the control room for most of the taping, obviously. And then they did 2 shows. They did 2 tapings. Then I would go into the edit suite where I would actually look at notes and go into the edit suite, the big online suites. And we would make a 30-minute version. And I did that for a long time. My hours were really crazy. I forgot to say that's how it was at Satellite News Channel too. I was hired after intern, but they're like, the bad news is your days off are Monday and Tuesday, and your shift is 4 to midnight. So I was like, okay. But even with Sally, my hours were, I think, 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. because I had to wait for the morning to get going and then the tapings. And that's okay. It all worked out because I really enjoyed what I was doing. And that
you never worked with the guests then at that point? You weren't wrangling guests and getting them fake teeth and all that stuff at that point?
No, because mine was so much in post and in the control room. And as a matter of fact, they were kind of grooming me to be a director. And I became very, very good friends with the director of the Sally Show, who I am still very good friends with. He's the director now at People's Court and has been there for a long time. So I was actually called, I think they did put my title as associate director. So I was like the AD, and I also helped cue the stage manager when the show was close to time, 3 minutes to the end of the break, 2 minutes, that kind of thing. So I learned a lot of the tech aspect of TV that I wasn't really, I wouldn't say that was my love or what I wanted to do, but it was very, very good to learn. I mean, and I would also recommend that to anyone who's like, well, I really like writing and producing, and I'm not technical. You really have to know it. So much of TV is technical, right? So
Yeah, as we say, we know enough to be dangerous, right?
Exactly.
You're absolutely right, though, and that's a great point to make, because early on in your career, I found that it was important, and it drove my dad in particular crazy because I would switch jobs.
Right.
But I always utilized all of the skills that I learned at the different jobs and kind of like bundled them together to create the person, that I've become today. I've used all those experiences, the people I've met, the work that I've done, whether it was the writing and the editing and the producing and just managing talent and egos and things like that. So that's a really great point, Barb, because sometimes people get in their own way, especially when they're young. They have this like real specific idea of what they want to do, and they can't see past the fact that, why don't you try this and then take some of those skills and also network with people along the way and maybe get another job. So that's a really great tip.
Well, you're absolutely right. That's, and I kind of, it's not like I pushed back, because I wouldn't call it that, but they could tell that wasn't where my heart was. But I still feel like it was, probably the most valuable time I spent was that time in the control room. And also hearing all the craziness going on between the producers and the EP, and that's where where you hear about people like throwing things and swearing at each other. It all happened there. I don't know,
being on those headsets in the control room or even on the floor. Really interesting things that people never hear, but that's where the anchors say things and
my goodness. Yep. And dealing with the talent, and, Sally was lovely, but she had also her moments too, where she wanted, to be positioned in a way, and her best way. And, so we would always try to make everybody happy. That's like kind of the control on it. So again, we're going to make everybody happy. Sound has to be happy. The visuals everybody has to be happy. And
so where did you go from there? From Sally, you went
at Sally. I did keep hounding my boss, who I loved. He's just a great guy. And I just
your hounding, by the way, is not.
Well,
hounding, I think, is a pretty strong word for Barb. Okay. Barb is is like the sweetest person I know, and hounding is you weren't.
Thank you for saying that.
A thorn in their side.
No, I have to agree. I didn't I wasn't obnoxious about it, but I really was. I said, look, I really want to work in the field. I want to do some more stories set up.
So like the backstories and then they come on the set and talk to Sally, right?
Yes. And these are taped pieces so that the audience can get a glimpse of, a setup and a tease, pretty much a little tease of what the story was and the topic for the day. So I started doing those, and that's where I hit like 100%. That was it for me.
But you found your voice, right?
I found my voice.
That one person that gave you the advice to be louder in the newsroom. I love that, because first of all, my husband always tells me, and my kids like, Mom, you're loud. Tone it down. Stop talking. I never had that problem. As all you people out there who know me probably know. Roll your eyes now. But
no, I admire
that.
Valuable.
Love that. But it was so valuable for you because you are kind of this quiet, sweet, amazing human being. So you got your voice and stood up for yourself and said, you know what? I know this isn't for me. This is not what I want to do. But how powerful is that to be able to stand up for yourself and say that?
Absolutely, Jody. And I admire people who don't have a hard time doing that, like you. That's my oh my gosh, I wish I could be like that. But I've grown, I think, through the years, and I think it's so important to use your voice for what you want. I mean, you can do it in a way that is, just a way that people are going to respect. It worked because we kept doing these pieces, and I did get to go out in the field, and some of those stories, that's like a whole other podcast, but they were incredible. And I had no problem, though I'm kind of on the maybe less assertive side, I had no problem going up to perfect strangers I never have in my life and talking to them and gaining their trust. And like, Jody, when you're interviewing people, if they don't trust you or even like you, to be honest, they're not going to give you a great interview. So 100%. That's a skill that is also something you have to hone if it's not natural to you. Fortunately,
but you have a calming sort of this calming effect on me, on other people. That's why, you were so extraordinary as an EP and director of programming. You had this calm about you. And I think that, definitely comes through when you're interviewing someone. To your point, you have to get somebody's respect and they need to feel safe. Right. I mean, especially let's talk about just talk shows in general, because I've worked quite a bit, like doing backstories for the Dr. Phil show or, stuff for Rachel Ray. They need to feel safe. It is our responsibility at that point to say, okay, I need to be a calming influence and make this happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's in some of the topics, when I left Sally, I actually left Sally to go to Maury Povich in this similar role. I was the field producer there. Some of the topics were really just tough. It's, a mom who's lost her daughter. We went into the bedroom, she didn't want to take the stuff out. Like you really did have to have a sensibility that this is going to be okay. You have to reassure people that they weren't going to feel bad about being on the show. Like, I think that's the one thing, Sally, and I'll have to say Maury at that time, I'm not sure if I could say things didn't evolve and change, but
to be like Jerry Springer.
Yeah. I mean, that all became more important because as the audience got used to seeing, and hearing stories from real people, stranger than fiction, they wanted more tantalizing stuff. They wanted more arguing. They wanted sensational. So you can't really fault the producers of the talk show. It's like, this is what the audience is asking for. But really, there were a lot of important stories that I would say, I really did enjoy working on.
But there are also a lot of times, I know this for myself, even working on, I would just, sometimes they'd call me and say, we'd like you to go to Tampa and cover this story. And I would ask a few questions and I really would think, am I going to be able to actually do this without crying or whatever? Yes. And, there were many times where I do an interview where I tear up and I try not to become part of the story or influence the person that I'm interviewing. And over the years, I actually, this is crazy, but I actually do this technique and I haven't had to use it much lately, but I will dig my fingernails into the pads of my fingers to inflict enough pain that my brain focuses on how my finger feels instead of crying and disrupting the person's interview, because that's, always, you don't want to stop somebody's interview by snorting in the background, blowing your nose and, it's not that easy. I mean, I sat across a woman that was like, feet in front of me. And this is another story. I won't even discuss it, but it was a Dr. Phil shoot. And the producer was in my ear screaming at me, telling me to get her to say exactly, remember we talked about this earlier, exactly what she said in the pre-interview. Yeah. And she was screaming at me. And I've never had that happen before. And I stopped answering the phone and she was pissed. She read me the riot act afterward. And then I read her the riot act and I called the people at Dr. Phil and I said, listen, I love working with you, but I will never work with that producer again. She's horrible. Talk show is tough, Barb. It's tough.
Yeah, it is. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you are drawing the line like that. And I can just relate a couple times to your story because I was actually sent to cover the fires, the church fires in Birmingham, Alabama. And I went out and I was meeting with the mayor of the town, and we were talking about the separate lives that the different areas and the different cultures of Birmingham, which is probably still true. And I arrive at his house, and I have a crew. We meet local crews, if anyone doesn't know that. So you're meeting a local crew, and they're great. But we walk in, and the mayor says, "Oh, you're here. Well, I'm going to take you fishing." And I look at my watch, and I'm like, I don't have time to go fishing. I have to, and again, I'm like you said, you're like, oh my gosh, my producer, they're going to be screaming at me. Like, what are you doing? We need this interview. And then you have to go to 3 other interviews today. So I let them know. I said, he's definitely working out this sort of getting to know you thing. And I'm going to have to go fishing. So we went fishing. The crew went, we went fishing. We got catfish. It was the only way I could get him to answer any difficult questions. And
because you made him feel safe.
I made him feel safe. And I still feel like I did not exploit him. He did come out saying that, 11 o'clock on Sunday, everyone's where they want to be, and no one's going to mess with that. He said that. So what you interpret from that is it just didn't make him look that great, because he was like, we want to be separate. No one wants to change that, period. So I thought that was, just an indication of, okay, at least I got what they wanted me to have him say, but I had to go around quite a bit to get to that point. And get
Were you ever scared when you were out on those shoots?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was. Yeah. At that particular time,
especially in the talk show world, when you're doing those backstories.
Yeah. One time where I was in Newark, New Jersey, following a cheating husband. And we were in a van, and I kid you not, the name of the detective was, what would they call him? Detective Dick. Okay. For Richard something, but he was Detective Dick. So the Detective Dick and me and the crew, we're in a unmarked van in Newark, and we have like a hidden camera on a husband going into a house. And as we're recording it, there were a group of younger kids that came over and just started like messing with the van and shouting threats. And I said, I looked at the cameraman. I'm like, is this where we're going to die? I mean, this is it. This is going to be where we die. So fortunately, nothing happened, but it was a little bit frightening. And a couple other things like that, I would say.
How do you prepare yourself, or how did you prepare yourself, knowing that you were going to be put in a situation? Because it's happened time and again where we are put in situations as the producer, field director, where we have to take responsibility too, not just for our own safety, but for our crew's safety. How did you prepare for that?
That's a very good question. So I think, and this will come back time and time again to my life. So my dad was in the military. So he was a colonel. He was World War II. And he brought us up like we were soldiers in a way. I mean, in a loving way, but we did learn early on that he was not emotional, and we did learn early on that my sister and I, we have a dad that is never going to cry in front of us, that is never going to show emotion, that is always going to be the person to count on in an emergency. If you need something, he will keep calm and you'll get through it. Like, for instance, my son as a baby fell down the stairs. My dad was like, get in the car. I'm taking you right to the emergency room. Everyone's crying. My father, cool as a cucumber. So I think being around that definitely helped. And it helped later on after I took a little hiatus from TV and worked as a teacher as well.
But he probably prepared you and your sister as women
Yes.
to be
tougher,
cognizant of your surroundings, stand up for yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's it. It was kind of like a fearless attitude, like, which I was just brought up with, taking risks are okay and doing things, but you never really can quite prepare yourself until the moment happens. And then you just have to, you have to concentrate, pray, whatever it is, just get through it. And know that it's only television. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, look at it. We're making a show. It's all going to work out. The magic of editing. Right?
I've had that conversation with people who have worked for me that get, not that I've never had it happen to me, but, you get so emotionally involved and in your head that you kind of lose sight of the fact. And I would say that all the time is, it's just TV. We are not saving lives right now. This is not that kind of show. It's one thing if you're working on a documentary and you're revealing information or really making, and in news a little bit more, but sometimes, like a wedding story, which we'll talk about next, is like, no, it's a TV show. It's supposed to be fun. Go home and take a freaking break. It's not supposed to be this intense. So let's talk. Let's talk about that, because it's important to keep your wits about you and know we have to kind of separate ourselves from the content, right?
Yes. And this just brings to mind sort of a pivotal moment for me, which I was working, this was on the Maury Povich show, and we had a show about teenage runaways. And they were on the show with the parents, and they promised they would not run away. Soon as they left and got home outside of Detroit, Michigan, one of them ran away. So they called me and said, you've got to go to Michigan, meet a crew, and find her. So that was my task. So go find her. I got on the plane, I met the crew, we got to her house, and she's there. And she's at the kitchen table with her family. And I show up with the cameraman, and like, first thing I think of is, oh my God, am I going to get fired? I mean, I got here too late. They already found her. Not what is really happening with this dynamic in this family. And then, the mom, she came up and she was sobbing, and everyone is crying. And I said, I'll just stand back here, and, when you're ready, we'll talk. And I did. But I did tell the cameraman to roll tape, just like a little bit of a glimpse what's going on, from the doorway, this family. There was, stepdad, mom, little sister, and the 16-year-old runaway. As we're doing this, police car comes, sirens wailing, 2 policemen come out, they handcuff her, they shackle her, and they drag her into the police car. And it's the most dramatic, it's like unfolding drama, reality. There's nothing we did but roll tape. The little sister is clinging onto her legs as she's being dragged out. Mom is freaking out. Apparently they did arrest her for truancy because she was skipping school. And also her boyfriend.
Seems overly aggressive.
I mean, a lot of this stuff coming up with police. So, it was a lot of, it was very dramatic. And I did wind up staying there, to make a long story short, for like 3 days, following her through juvenile, they put her in juvie, and a couple other issues because her boyfriend was 5 years older. So it was actually statutory rape. And there were so many different components to this story. But it was kind of the beginning of that reality programming in one of the most dramatic ways. We did do a show, and although I loved it, I just was so, my heart went out to this girl. I tried to talk to her. She's fine. She wound up being fine. The happy ending, back to school, everything good. But it just, like, to your point, it was like, wow, I can't separate myself from that emotional experience. And I was in the elevator editing. I was like trying to find a sound effect, and in New York City. And at that point, you had to get your sound effects from a different floor. Like, I was up on the, I don't know, 8th floor, and we were editing on the 5th floor, and I had to get actual, tapes, sound effects. And I got off on the wrong floor, and I got off where there was this wedding going on. And I looked around, I was like, it was a Saturday or a Friday, can't remember, but I was like, look at me, here I am, 1:00 in the morning. This is my life. I'm looking for, chicken farm sound effects. And, and these people are having this great time partying. And that's when I really knew that I had to make a switch out of talk shows. And it was just too much. The hours were very, very long. And that will lead to.
And then you became the EP of A Wedding Story.
I did. I had, and actually it's interesting because I had a choice to go to Los Angeles for a couple of my friends. And this is something I think, Jody, too, like you follow your friends. TV is like the little family, wherever people go, you still stay in touch, and you should.
It is a little bit incestuous.
A little bit.
TV business.
It is, but it's a good way.
Gift. It really is a gift in a lot of ways, right?
It is because you can, you're always going to, if you stay in touch, they might remember you for something down the line.
Well, they're part of your network.
Part of the network. And this was a group that was starting, I forgot the name of the show. I'm not sure, that it was a talk show in Los Angeles. And it would have been a considerable amount of money, but it would have required me to move. And I didn't want to do that for several reasons. And my family being certainly one of them. And I was just getting into a relationship. This Banyan opportunity, I'm not even sure how, Judy. I think it was Jean McHale-Waite. I know she contacted me, or I contacted her, or somehow we connected. And I went to interview there, and I just fell in love with Banyan. And it reminded me a little bit of that first place I worked at. And it was the whole vibe I was looking for. I was looking for, a place where people were happy and kind of, not always stressed, still TV, but, in just a better, very happy. But we
enjoyed each other's company too. So when we worked hard and worked all those hours, we still were interested in staying together, and we would go out in the evenings or hang out. Yeah, it was really special. But A Wedding Story was like completely opposite to what you'd been doing. So, I mean, that must have been a bit of a light for you.
It was a big light. And just also for me personally, because I was, like I said, was just dating, someone new who's now my husband. And I felt like, marriage and all the traditions and all the happiness, love stuff was really, really, really fit with what I was going through personally as well. And always loving those stories. The wedding stories were just great. And I remember Jean asking me, she's like, if we could figure out what is love, like if anyone could actually verbalize what is love, like she's like, we'd be billionaires, number one, but who can really explain it? Like everybody has their own version. So it was
that
great.
Show was so successful. I mean, 11 seasons, 13, I don't know. It was a lot of seasons that we worked on. I remember going out on a show. You were still the EP, I believe. We went to Boston, and we did that show together.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And that was insane. The bride's brother was like all over me. I remember that.
Oh, yes.
He ended up in jail. Remember?
I do.
Got in a fight, and he like knocked somebody out, and he ended up in jail. But he was,
he was just stalking you. And yeah, I remember every moment of that. That was, yeah.
But that was a fun shoot. We had a good time outside of that crazy person. But A Wedding Story, it connected so many of us. And I think that what I really enjoyed about it was meeting so many different people that we were covering their weddings and their stories, traveling around the country, learning about different cultures, because we covered so many different types of weddings, right? And I learned so much, even though it seems like kind of trite to say it, like it's just a wedding, but no, it's not. You learn about people, and their interactions with each other. I mean, we had a couple of bridezillas for sure, but in general, the families were so kind and brought us into their lives like we were part of their families. I mean, they say getting married, moving, changing jobs, death, like there's some of the top 5, in the top 5 things that are the most difficult time of your life. Who wants 2 camera crews following you around during the most stressful time of your life? And yet they just opened their arms and brought us in and gave us gifts. And I mean, it was really such a treat to work on that show, especially with you. I learned so much from you. And I also learned how to just be calmer in certain situations and be a really good leader. So you went on to become the director of programming, and then I became the executive producer of A Wedding Story. But I really did learn a lot from you, and enjoyed, collaborating. And we worked on the dermatology show called The Gist, which was a web series. That was so much fun. We did that for quite a while. And, do you find that every job that you take, you're now working for A&E, and you started with them like years ago, and you came full circle with them as well, recutting old shows, creating new content, that sort of thing. Talk about the evolution of your job at A&E, because that's interesting. And also your husband is an editor at A&E.
That's right. So Banyan, I would have stayed at Banyan forever. Like you said, I mean, I learned so much from you. I think we learned so much from each other, all of us. And, so many lifelong friends. Like Jody, you're just a lifelong friend now. And many people at Banyan feel that way, I'm sure. It's just a great place to be and really, learn everything and have such a positive experience. And so I did have to leave because, I got married. I got married and my husband was working in New York. So we would try to do the long distance thing. We even bought a house we thought was in between, really wasn't close to either New York or Philadelphia. Beautiful.
That was a great property.
Farmhouse in which we still we regret we don't have in Bucks County. But eventually I wound up back in New York City, and I really wanted to start a family. And that was, Jody, you had just had your son. I was really hoping that I could have children. And then at that point, that was important to sort of be in the same city as my husband.
It kind of works that
way. Yeah. So we were in a tiny little apartment on the Upper West Side. Didn't matter. It was all great. John is an editor, and he was editing at a company many years there. And I was doing, eventually did get pregnant with my daughter, who is now 21. And when I was pregnant, I was trying to do some freelance work, and I did find a job in A&E, cutting down their biography shows. So I started doing that, which is kind of funny, way back then. And then once I had kids, eventually had another child, and we eventually moved back to Connecticut with the intention that I would work for Martha Stewart, who was starting her own production company, and National Video was starting a huge post house in Connecticut at the time. And I thought, this is perfect. We go back to Connecticut, go back to working. And unfortunately, that didn't work out. Like many things you think are going to work out, that did not. She was arrested. That was all during that time, unfortunately. And the National Video did not. I think they opened for a very short period of time. It just didn't work for them, and that never happened. So I was happily being a mom and trying to work on separate projects. Worked on a few pilots with a former colleague from Sally for a little while. And as the kids got a little older, I said, well, maybe I should have a backup plan. Always have a backup plan, right? So I decided to go to get my master's degree. And I thought, maybe I could do something that has TV and, storytelling mixed with teaching. And landed at as a school library media specialist, a program at Fairfield University. I did that one. I got my master's. And once I got the master's, I had to go into the student teaching program in the library. It was quite a long and arduous journey. And I have such amazing respect for teachers now because it's tough. It's tough. And I actually, Jody, was a teacher for 9 years. I was part-time because I still had the kids, and then I did some full-time. And so, although when I say teacher, it was a media specialist, but really I worked.
But you still had 20 kids coming in and out of the library and like 10 packs of them every day, right?
Absolutely.
Not just a teacher in a classroom is a different story. You're teaching all these kids in seventh grade.
Like 500 kids. So 500 different. And I was doing a lot of instructional computer training, technology, which is why, again, that technology, that first instance of technology and also learning that to get my master's and working in the school system has really been helpful for me and has given me a little bit more of a technical edge than if I hadn't, let's put it that way. So,
but you still had the bug for TV, didn't you?
I did. And although I love teaching, I would say the big moment for me was the Sandy Hook shooting. So when that happened, we were the district right next to Newtown, Connecticut, and talk about trying to be calm, trying not to show emotion. Well, we couldn't, we couldn't. We had to pretend in that terrible, awful day that everything was okay. So
you had to keep the kids calm and you had to keep each other calm.
We had to keep everybody calm, and we were in a lock-in situation, which means that nobody could come into our building. Protected, nobody could leave, really. Actually, you could leave if you had to, like some of the teachers, but parents who were trying to get their kids really couldn't come in. So there was a lot of emotions going on, and a lot of very, very scary because we were trying to keep the kids, as best as they could out of knowing what was really happening pretty close to our school.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying.
We thought there might have been. Thought that there might be another shooter. There was a time that they were like, oh, and so we, I just had the kids read books all day. They just they could draw, they could read books, try to keep safe and maintain that kind of calm, you're going to be okay attitude. And I think that was really hard. That was something that I think all teachers who have gone through this, you practice, you know what to do, you know what to say, but it's still for me was just, this is really tough. I'm not sure that this is going to work out for me. And that this is really this responsibility for these, tiny humans was, and I had kindergarten, I had young kids, and I just was very, it was hard. It was hard for me. So I decided to try to figure out something else to do. And I'm so glad I reconnected with you because then we started to work on other projects, and we worked on the dermatology show, and it was just being back home.
And now you're back at A&E, so you really came full circle. Tell me about what you're doing now, because it's exciting. I mean, you actually were hired by a management or a resource company that hires subcontractors, right, at first, and then you did that for a while, and now you work full time. Talk about that whole thing, because a lot of people don't understand that there are these outside resources that you can go to and get a freelance job. We call them permalancers, right? Because you feel like you're a permanent employee, but you don't get all the perks. You don't get the benefits or the, paid vacation or insurance or 401k, but you are employed full time. Now, a lot of times they'll say, well, we pay you a better day rate, right? Because we're not paying your Social Security and pension and welfare and all these things. But we both are not, we know you're not really getting paid that much more. But talk a little bit about those outside services and then how you got into A&E and what you're doing now.
As I was freelancing and working on projects with you, and I think, Jody, you said you might want to take a look at this job posting I just saw. It's in Stanford. It's a post producer on their content creation team. Might want to check it out, because I was looking for full-time work. I mean, things are just getting expensive, and I needed to get back to, a more steady type of job. So I did reach out to the posting, and the managing producer called me back, and I consequently interviewed with them, and they called Jody. Jody was one of my references, and another good friend of mine, Kit Carson, who is the director at People's Court. And when I went to interview with them, the funny thing is, as I spoke about Satellite News Channel, so I drove in, it's the same building, the same offices that I started out. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same, I'm looping into the garage onto the second floor where it says 250. It was really just, it's funny. Like it's so full circle. And when I walked in, it was like, I knew that they were just an incredible team of people. My kind of, I would say, interesting, uneven, even experience, like different areas, different things that I did, really helped for this interview, because it's putting together from archival shows compilations, like the best of the American Pickers, the best of Pawn Stars. So I said, well, that's interesting, because that's what I did at Sally. I took the show, I had to condense it into 30 minutes, and they thought that was interesting.
And they were really highly successful shows that were still creating new content.
Well, we were tasked to create new, we call them APBOs, American Picker Best Ofs. We would get like 30 episode packs. And that's where they brought me in as a temporary, because, it's not like, oh, we know we're going to have 5 years worth of work here, so that's how they like to hire based on their needs. And it makes sense. And then that just kept getting renewed. It was like 30 more. Oh, they want 30 more. Oh, now Pawn Stars wants to do this. So the idea of the compilations has been very successful for A&E and for the brand. And I was temporary for, I believe, 2 years, and then was offered a staff position. And I'm thrilled to be there. They're great people, wonderful shows. Again, you can feel good. Like when we did Wedding Story, everyone loves the History Channel. Like you're learning. It put together everything that I kind of in my background, because I still like that library kind of learning new information,
right? The
technology, the dealing with people.
And you're also doing development, right?
We're always working on new ideas and new pitches, and the company is very, really promotes that kind of attitude. It's like a teamwork place, which I really love. So it's been really great. I do love it. I'm not in the field, like I said. That's the one thing that I really did most of my career.
Do you miss
it's okay.
Do you miss being in the field at all?
Sometimes I do like meeting new people. Then now that we're all remote, we are 100% remote. It does sometimes get a bit like, okay, I have my computer here. My husband, who's an editor at A&E, also is 24 hours home, right? The next room right behind me. We're able to make this work remotely. So it's great. I mean, it's great. And it's also like, it would be nice to do, maybe have a hybrid combination work environment too, where we could go into the office. So we might do that as well.
So if you were going to give advice, and obviously your kids are entering the workforce, right? What have you done to inspire your kids to follow their dreams?
I think it's very important to be open to trying anything. If you want to get into a business, no matter what it is, marketing, TV, finance, sciences are a little bit more cut and dry, but if you want to get into a business that has so many different areas, don't just say, "Oh, I'm not technical. I can't." I don't put yourself into a narrow hole, because learning everything you can. If you learn how to edit, great. You might not want to be an editor, but learn it anyway. Just experience everything you can and ask a lot of questions, talk to people, and be able to roll up your sleeves and say, how can I help? And that's what I told my daughter, who's just starting to. I'm like, how can I help? And also, don't be late. But
don't be late. You said?
Don't be late. Don't be late. Don't be late. It sounds so trivial, but don't be late. People don't like when you're late. And
be prepared.
Be prepared. And be yourself, be true to yourself. And also something that I think someone told this to me, and I love it. And I tell my kids this a lot, because sometimes they're struggling with, what am I going to do? Which, and they will get offered more than one job. And so many young people will. Maybe they'll have a choice. But, go for the bold move. The bold move is the one you're going to regret not doing. It might be harder, it might be scarier, but if you take the bold move and it doesn't work out, fine. Then you go back to something that feels a little bit more safe. But that bold move is really crucial. And I know my daughter, she was struggling, like she really wanted to go to school in California. But then she was like, I don't want to leave. Maybe I should go closer so I don't leave you and dad. And, I said, just do that bold move, because if it's something you don't like, you're not stuck in it. But it's harder to do it later. It's harder to say, oh, I'm going to go 2,000 miles away and live. And same with the job. So
I love that. Be bold.
Be bold. Be bold.
Just, I think, like that's where Nike, like their slogan is just do it.
I love that.
And be bold is, I love that. Yeah. It's, such a great lesson to teach other people. And you do have to get out of your comfort zone, because Absolutely. Even though I can talk and I have the gift of gab, I mean, there are plenty of times where I'm uncomfortable, or I really kind of, believe it or not, retreat into that shell of, I don't want to say anything, or, that feeling of sort of that lack of confidence every now and then. I mean, I think, a lot of people get that way, but being bold is such an important aspect for anybody, because you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be, a writer. You do have to stand out. It's a lot more competitive now. And I do think with all of these other layers of content creators and outlets to get your content on the air, with all of the competition, you need to stand out. Unfortunately, there are so many people who stand out, in my mind, for the wrong reasons. They're a little bit racy, they're rude, But there are those other people who really resonate and connect with others. And you have to find a way to stand out in the crowd. And
Absolutely.
to your point, being on time, being available and saying, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. I mean, within reason.
Within
obviously.
reason. Yeah.
And just stepping up and finding your voice and standing up for yourself. If you do something for a little bit of time, and this is something that I've been talking to my son about, who is working in Canada for a media company. When he interviewed for the job, they said he would be doing translations, and he was a linguistics major with a political studies minor and a degree in Spanish. And he speaks fluent French, and that's what he wants to do. And he thought that that's what he would be doing. And to your point about technology, he's almost like an assignment desk person with technology. So they cover all the parliamentary meetings and everything. And he's like, I'm not sure this is for me. This is not exactly what I want to do. And I told him the same thing I've told kids that have been, that I've mentored, that have been interns. Try to glean every possible thing you can get out of that job. Take the things that you like about it and store them here.
Future reference.
For future reference. And then you can tap into those skills when you get your next job. And it's just so important not to lose sight, especially getting out of school and getting your first job. You're not always going to get your ideal job, the job of your dreams. There's not that many people that do. There are some, and I give everybody credit who's been able to do that. But what I think is important is just sticking to your goals that you set for yourself. And I guess really is, right? Setting goals is important.
Oh, definitely. And I think, you're absolutely right. You have to know yourself. It takes a while, and especially when you're young, you don't know yourself that well. You don't know your abilities. You don't know what you're really good at. And I wanted to share one quick story. I know we're going late. A friend of mine, her daughter was a rower. So she was applying to a lot of schools. And when she was rowing, she was in the middle of the boat. She's very strong. She's sturdy. She's great. She wasn't at the front. She's not the coxswain getting people to motivate them and steer the boat. Not at the back, where you really have to have that powerhouse. Right smack in the middle of the boat. And so as she was applying for colleges, she was at a regatta, and recruiters were there, and they approached my friend, her mom, and they said, "Is that your daughter in the middle of the boat?" And my friend said, "Yes, that is." And they said, "I bet she doesn't get that attention, but she's the one. She's the one that is really providing the structure of the whole boat." I mean, if you're not able to keep that balance in the middle, you're going to go off course, and you're not going to work as a team. And he's like, I'd like to meet her.
What a metaphor for life.
I always think of that too, because I'm not the loudest person up there, and I'm not the person, you need all people on your team, right? You need everybody to work together. And I think it might sound a little trite, but it's really true. Like you might know that you're more of a middle of the boat person. Maybe you're the one holding everything together. It's still a strength, and just work to your strengths once you figure out what
and
those
try
are.
Each position, right?
Yes, because you don't know who you are. It takes a long time. I still don't. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
We're still working through
We're
that.
still working through. Where am I on the boat? I'm on a couple of things. I don't know where I'm on. Probably off the boat swimming.
Oh, well, you're definitely strong and steady.
I hope so.
That is for sure. I know you're busy, Barb. I know you have a lot going on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. And of course, you know how much I love you, and we'll chat again. There's so much that we didn't talk about. I love you, my dear friend, and look forward to bringing you back on and talking about some of the new projects that you're going to be working on.
Same.
So enjoy your day.
You too. Bye, Jody. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Barb. Subscribe to our podcast to hear more.